What is a superhero? Arguably, the greatest and most well-known superhero is Superman, the Man of Steel, a symbol of strength and nobility. But to Christians, that superhero is none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the only true ideal. Well, what if I told you that one of these is a replica of the other? It's no secret by now that there are obvious similarities between the two. My intention is not to trivialize Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior. Rather, it is my intention to present the case that over time, Superman's character has evolved to a level that he is almost identical to Jesus Christ. I put together a list of 10 parallels between the life of Jesus Christ, as told in the Bible, and the Man of Steel. I grew up watching Superman the movie, which was released by Warner Brothers in 1978, so I'll be using a lot of clips from that movie, along with clips from the 2000 Man of Steel, also by Warner Brothers. Both movies tell the same story in a slightly different way. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this list. The prefix and suffix El is known in the Bible as meaning God. Any variations of El describe defining characteristics of that person plus the word God before or after it. For example, in Matthew 1:23, the angel told Mary that her son would be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. Another example is Eliezer, which means my God is my help. See Exodus 18:4. Here are just a few more examples. In the 1978 Superman movie, teenage Kal-El asks his father, who is a spirit, that profoundly existential question, who am I? The answer gives us our first parallel. Let's watch.
Who am I?
Your name is Kal-El.
Moses' mother placed baby Moses in a basket and sent him down the river to escape the massacre of the babies in Egypt. The basket was looked over until it, with baby, arrived safely at Pharaoh's home. Here he was cared for instead of being murdered, which made for a very happy baby. I mean, just look at happy potato baby Moses. Baby Jesus and his family escaped an identical massacre in Bethlehem where he was born, also by divine guidance as an angel warned them to flee. Baby Kal-El escaped the global massacre of Krypton by being placed in a basket, a space basket if you will. He traveled through an ocean of stars to reach Earth, and there he was raised by a kind farmer and his wife. That's one happy-looking space baby. Now, I grew up watching the 1978 Superman movie. I must have seen it 1,000 times, and there was something that I had always noticed but never really stopped to analyze. In this scene, Kal-El's ship, or Moses' basket, is flying through space. Notice how in the upper right-hand corner of the scene there appears to be some sort of nebula, or space debris, or who knows what. This debris very much resembles a hand, a divine hand guiding Kal-El's ship to its destination. This parallel is biblical as Moses is a type or symbol of Jesus. Superman's voyage is very much in line with both biblical accounts of baby Moses and baby Jesus escaping death. So technically, Moses could wear one of these, or one of these. In chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, we're told that the Hebrews in Egypt were multiplying rapidly. Pharaoh thought that forcing them into hard labor would quash the problem, but it had the opposite effect. So he decreed artificial population control by having all Hebrew boys be put to death as soon as they were born. Now, out of the same Hebrew people, Moses was born. As mentioned a moment ago, Moses is a type or a symbol of Christ. Moses led God's people out of physical bondage, while Jesus leads the people out of spiritual bondage. The civilization on Krypton faced a similar problem in that their largely successful culture caused their population to grow to a point that artificial population control was established. Each new child was born a slave to his or her profession. Chapter 2 of the book of Matthew tells us that the wise men followed a bright star, which they knew signaled the exact location of baby Christ. Here you find Jor-El putting the finishing touches on what would be Kal-El's Moses basket. Check out the unusual design. The Kryptonians were supposed to be an advanced civilization, and I know aerodynamics don't come into play in the vacuum of space, but they do upon entry into Earth. And I think Kal-El's mother knew this. She's got this look on her face like, we're putting him in that, and Jor-El's thinking, yeah, we're putting him in that, I didn't see you build anything, woman. And she's like, oh no, we're gonna need a miracle. But why no wings, or a rudder, or something? I'll tell you why. Because just as a star signaled the arrival of the Messiah Jesus Christ on Earth, so too a star marked the arrival of Kal-El to planet Earth. Although Jesus Christ is the only Son of God, on Earth he was raised by human parents. They cultivated his mind, taught him to use his body, and deeply nurtured his spirit in order to prepare his character for the mission he was later to carry out. Kal-El, or Superman, was sent to Earth, where he was raised by a kind farmer and his wife, named Jonathan and Martha Kent. They raised him to be self-sacrificing and in control of his powers. It's important to note that when the Superman comics were still young, Clark Kent's parents were named Joseph and Mary Kent. Their names evolved to the more familiar Jonathan and Martha Kent, or Ma and Pa Kent. The childhood of Jesus has always been a topic shrouded in mystery, as there is not much said about it in the Gospels. All we know of him between the time he was found in the temple astonishing the elders until the time he is an adult is that he, quote, grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men, end quote. Luke 2:52. He was obedient to the fifth commandment by honoring his mother and father, and apparently that's all we needed to know about that part of his life. We see glimpses of Kal-El's early childhood with only bits and pieces of his adolescence. We see him beginning to discover some of his powers, like his speed and strength. But more importantly, the focus was always on the development of his character. Thus, he was always a pillar of the community, liked by friends, and obedient to his parents. The last record we have of Joseph being alive was during that time that the child Jesus was with the elders in the temple. Joseph is mentioned a couple of times after that, but only in passing. For example, quote, "Is this not the carpenter's son?" End quote, Matthew 13:55. And even here, it's very possible that Joseph had already passed away. It's much more evident that Joseph is no longer in the picture when we read the accounts of Jesus' trial and execution. Of course, there's no doubt that Joseph, being a good and godly man, took immensely serious the role of Earth Father to the Savior of humanity. Now, different comics tell of Pa Kent's death differently, but what they all have in common is that he dies sometime in the early life of Kal-El. He didn't get to see Clark mature into the Superman he would later become. But his lessons were always at the forefront of Kal-El's mind, leading him to the ideal mindset that the right thing to do is always the right thing to do. And Pa Kent keenly understood the grave responsibility bestowed upon him in raising this child. He had to be a good example in every part of his life, from kindness to work ethic to integrity to selflessness. Because only these kinds of traits would do in building a child who would one day grow up to be Earth's greatest savior. Now here's where it gets super interesting, pun intended. Chapter 28 of the book of Ezekiel describes a high-ranking angel known as a cherub, who is Lucifer. This angel let his status go to his head and became unhappy with the way God was governing the universe. He became the adversary, which in Hebrew is Satan. We know him as Satan. God, being a wise judge, had to throw him out of heaven before he could infect others with his deceptions, but not before he took sympathizers with him. He created his own Trinity, mimicking the Trinity of the Godhead. This evil trinity is known as the dragon, who is Satan, the beast, who is the political power, and the false prophet, which is the false church. This can be found in Revelation chapters 12 through 18. In the opening scenes of the 1978 Superman movie, Jor-El is the wise judge trying and sentencing former high-ranking officer and defender of Krypton, General Zod, whose name sounds a lot like God. To his left are two sympathizers, also being tried and sentenced for treason. They are kicked out of Krypton as they have become a danger to the planet. The big guy in the middle is obedient. He's mute, capable of only beast-like grunts. What's really interesting is that in Bible symbolism, a woman is a church, whether the true church or the false church. In Revelation 17, there is an evil woman who symbolizes the false church/prophet. You can see this clearly illustrated here where the false church is personified as an evil woman. So to recap, we have the wise judge, God, judging general Zod, Satan, the beast, which is the political power, and the false prophet, the woman. Now, with this in mind, listen carefully to the scene of Jor-El describing the infamy of each of these criminals. Take note of certain key words like revolution and world order. It's kind of spooky.
On this mindless aberration, whose only means of expression are wanton violence and destruction. On the woman Ursa, whose perversions and unreasoning hatred of all mankind have threatened even the children of the planet Krypton. Finally, General Zod, once trusted by this council, charged with maintaining the defense of the planet Krypton itself, chief architect of this intended revolution and author of this insidious plot to establish a new order amongst us, with himself as absolute ruler.
We now know that the dragon of Revelation is none other than Satan, who was kicked out of heaven by Jesus' father, the wise judge. Revelation 14:4 says that, quote, "The dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born." End quote. Mary and Joseph had to flee their home with baby Jesus in hand, just like Moses did, because of Herod's order to kill all male children under 2 years of age. Again, the massacre of the innocents. Kal-El's parents sent him off in that Moses basket to escape. General Zod wanted to kill the baby who had just been born. Needless to say, Zod wasn't very happy. He swore to find Kal-El, the son of his judge.
I will find him!
Zod managed to track him down to Earth and demanded that the woman hand him over, which he of course refused to do. Zod threatened in order to kill all of humanity if Kal-El did not surrender to him. Again, we'd see the massacre of the innocents.
Surrender within 24 hours, or watch this world suffer the consequences.
They can be a great people, Kal-El. They wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way. For this reason, above all, their capacity for good, I have sent them you, my only son.